Sponsored by Local Touch Online, a free online magazine that has an exclusive article by Pop Culture Geekery every month.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Pop Culture Geekery. I'm Joe Solis and tonight I have another special guest. I have Vince Guzman joining us again from Geek Out SA. Welcome, Vince.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it was fun. If y'all didn't get a chance to check out our Clone Wars Season 7 review, you can go back and check out mine and Vince's opinions of the season, and then we also did kind of a retrospective of the whole series, which that was a long time to get through that series.
Yeah, it was.
But it's totally worth it, though.
Definitely.
Speaking of a long time ago, but not in a galaxy far, far away, how about in a studio far, far away that was purchased by the House of Mouse? This year marks 20 years since the original X-Men movie came out in theaters. 20 years, Vince. Can you believe that?
That's a long time. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's just one of those, like, there's been a couple of things that have been hitting anniversaries. You know, like last year was The Matrix hit 20 years, and I was like, what? You know?
Making us feel old.
Yeah. But, you know, obviously with Disney, you know, purchasing Fox, and then I saw that they posted this one up on Disney Plus recently. And then started realizing that it was the 20th anniversary. So I thought it'd be a good chance to revisit it. I rewatched it. Did you get a chance to rewatch it since they put it on Disney Plus?
I only caught a bit of it today, but yeah. I only caught a little bit of it because I didn't get to finish it.
Oh, that's fine. I mean, I assume if you're like me, you've probably seen it several times over the years anyway.
Several times. Over and over. We own it, so we watched it several times before. So,
yeah, and you know, it's one of those that I've definitely seen over the years. You know, I have it in my collection, which is packed away right now. You know, with everything else of my life since we're moving. But you know, and obviously I've seen the rest of the series as they release in theaters, and I've been there for the good, the bad, and the ugly on this X-Men franchise.
Yeah.
But I kind of wanted to start with a little bit of our history with this, with the X-Men in general, before the movies. Did you want to go first on that? Tell me, like, did you have a history with the X-Men before this movie came out in 2000?
I mean, probably the animated series. When I saw that, and that's one of my favorite characters in there was, of course, Wolverine, because I always really liked that character, and his powers always seemed awesome. And then he had the claws that were like so cool, adamantium claws. But no, that was my first. Because before that, I had never even seen the comic books for X-Men. Had no idea until I saw the animated series.
So did the animated series drive you to check out the comics afterwards?
It did.
Well, that's good. Then it did its job.
Yeah.
For me, X-Men goes back just a little bit further back than you, not too much further back. I mean, I had started collecting comics not very casually, like in the 80s, you know, through my local Stop and Shop is where I used to get them because I lived in a small town.
Yeah.
And so there was no comic shop nearby. I use services like, I just found this image today. I'll put it up. Do you remember a service that used to be in the back of the comics called American Entertainment?
No.
They were usually in the very last page or even the back cover, and you'll see it here when I post it. But basically, it was just a mailer service. So if you weren't anywhere near a comic shop, and they would list their comics, and then you would just kind of buy them ahead of time. Only thing with that service, if you wanted to get into Image Comics, that service played hell with you because, of course, Image was late all the time. So even though American Entertainment said it was going to be there at a certain time, it wasn't. So that was always fun. The struggles
I
of
hate when
living
that
in a
happens.
small town. Yeah.
Give
But
me my comics.
yeah, and trust me, the guy at the local Stop and Shop was no help in me asking questions. um, but yeah, my history, goes with Discovery. Well, it's actually probably very similar to yours now that I'm talking about it out loud. I do remember seeing the animated series when it came out. I mean, very iconic show. The creators or the main writers and a lot of the voice actors actually were in New Braunfels last year for Hill Country Comic Con. So I got a picture with them. So that was really cool.
Very nice.
Yeah, the lady who plays Rogue, like she still sounds like Rogue. Like I just wanted her to keep talking to me, because she's not necessarily like emoting a different voice. Like that's her voice. So
right.
But after that, I did start seeking out the comics, and I hit up Jim Lee's famous X-Men run, which was X-Men #1, which had already gone into like the several millions of copies had been sold, and I was tracking down second and third prints, couldn't find a first print to save my life. Now they're a dime a dozen.
Yeah.
But do you remember? I actually learned about this after, but it came out in '89. Do you remember a pilot for an X-Men show?
Yes.
Called Pride of the X-Men.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that, yes, it would have been kind of silly and very 80s. Wolverine had an Australian accent. So,
yeah.
But I feel like I still would have enjoyed it.
I don't know, but in hindsight, when you're looking at it now, you're like, really? It could have been better.
Yeah, there's so many things like that. I mean, this movie is one of those things that that's why, even though I've seen it so many times, I was like, I'm gonna go and watch it again and just have a fresh take on it and be like, okay, I'm not gonna let my fanboy cover the mistakes and things like that. Like I'm really gonna watch this movie. Because it is an important movie in comic book movie history because, of course we'd had, some hit comic book movies over the previous 20 years, Christopher Reeve's Superman, Michael Keaton's Batman, unfortunately that little reign ended with Batman and Robin, and most people thought that comic book movies would never recover after that. But then Marvel put out Blade with Wesley Snipes in '98. And even though it was R-rated, it did really well. And I think that was the beginning of them, seeing, maybe we can make money at this if we do it right. So 2 years later, we got, X-Men. So I'm assuming you got to see this in the theater when it first came out, right?
I did get to see this in the theater. And it was really cool. The only problem that I had with it is that while Hugh Jackman is a great Wolverine, at first I was like, that's not Wolverine. He's not short enough. He's too tall to be Wolverine.
They didn't want to spend the visual effects to shorten him. Kind of like the Hobbits.
And that's why people get, when they're thinking of like picking a new Wolverine, I was like, I know a perfect Wolverine, somebody that could play Wolverine. And people hate me for this, but I was like, Tom Cruise.
Oh, really? Wow.
Would make an awesome Wolverine. They're like, no, Hugh Jackman is Wolverine. I was like, but Tom Cruise is short. And Tom Cruise can act anything. After I saw him in, what was it? Tropic Thunder. I was like, he can do anything. He can do anything.
Oh yes, I remember that. That was crazy. I couldn't even believe that was him. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think he's actually older than Hugh Jackman, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I don't even know which way they're going to go with that. I mean, Marvel is obviously being very secretive with who their new X-Men are going to be. But but yeah, I mean, it was one of those, when it came out, I was still in the middle of college, and at the time, it was something new. It was like, okay, new in the sense, I guess, that it was like, okay, Batman and Robin, kind of, hurt the comic book movie industry for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Blade was good. And when this came out, I think what sold it for me was that opening scene. Like when I rewatched it and that opening scene with young Magneto.
Yeah.
And the concentration camp.
That was a cool scene there to kind of like introduce us to like how far back that they were mutating.
Yeah. Well, I think it was an exclamation point from the creative team to just be like, this is where we're going with this story. Like, this is how serious we're going to take it, And so to me, that was like the perfect beginning for this, because it just,
and this is why Magneto is the way he is.
Yeah. And then, so this is a year before Ian McKellen, started playing Gandalf, so he solidified himself in the nerd culture by playing Magneto and then by playing Gandalf,
Yeah.
And then intercutting those two with, of course, all his other roles for basically the next 15 years after that. And that's the thing that yes, despite all the problems that came later, a lot of the cast did continue on, especially Hugh Jackman. I think he's the one that was in the most movies, and he ended up going, I think, a full 17 years when he came to Logan.
And Hugh Jackman has a like full range of stuff that he can do. From out of all of them, I think he's been the most successful.
Oh yeah, you mean that isn't Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely Wolverine's movie. That's one thing I was realizing. Of course they pair him up with Rogue, which you being a fan of the cartoon, that role was filled by Jubilee in the cartoon. But they decided to go this route, which
in this movie, you just get a glimpse of Jubilee.
You don't see she's in the classroom, and that's it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's pretty much the way her character stays, unfortunately, even through the other movies.
That's one of the downfalls of that is that I never get to see Jubilee, because Jubilee for me was a big part of the animated series.
Well, she may be brought back. With Marvel's X-Men, and it was interesting. I really enjoyed Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. I mean, I guess once they introduced, once they kind of showed you what the look they were going for. Okay, they were going to do the all black, and they even make fun of it in the movie. Then I was like, okay, once I got past that, I'm like, okay, if you're a good actor, then you're going to own this part, Yeah. And that was the thing with him, from the first time we see him pop out his claws, to later on when they have the first fight in the snow against Sabretooth, which even back then, we all knew that Wolverine had healing, but in the comics, it was like a slow healing.
Yeah.
But of course, for it to be cinematically more eye-catching, it's like he just healed on the spot.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
Because further down, it like in the comics, spoiler alert, where in the comics, Magneto actually rips his skeleton out of his body.
Yes,
Wolverine's skeleton out of his body.
Well, it's the adamantium. His skeleton is still intact.
Well,
but that was a wicked scene. I was still collecting the X-Men comics when that happened. Yeah, that was probably. I mean, I haven't kept up with them as much since, but in what I read, that was definitely the most ruthless thing I ever saw Magneto do to somebody. But I mean, I know they do something similar in the Wolverine standalone movies where he goes back to the bone claws, but at this point, I can't remember the details. But we do get a Stan Lee cameo, He had actually been doing cameos since all the way back in the 80s, which I think he did like one of the Incredible Hulk TV show specials.
Yeah.
um, and I don't think he ever made it into the Blade movies. But he was on the beach here. He was a hot dog vendor as Senator Kelly's walking on the beach after he gets mutated. So of course that was a nice little tradition that started there, or it was more solidified, I guess, there. So then once the Marvel movies start 8 years later, he kind of runs concurrently because he's like doing the Marvel cameos and he's doing the Fox Studio cameos. So that was some nice continuity. Yeah, I haven't really talked too much about Patrick Stewart as Professor Xavier. I mean, I still feel like he was born for that role. I mean, obviously he went into that movie with everybody knowing him as Picard from, Star Trek Next Generation.
That didn't hurt him.
No, not at all. But yeah,
it's funny how you kind of get these people in the roles that aren't necessarily like what was in the animated series or what is in the comics, but then you kind of adopt them, just like I did with Wolverine. I adopted Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. I also adopted Patrick Stewart as Professor X.
Yeah. I mean, because I remember the one who played him in the animated series was really good too. But I guess if you're looking at those two, I would definitely say Patrick Stewart is closer to the animated Professor X than Hugh Jackman is to the animated Wolverine.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And speaking of Magneto,
other than that, Professor Xavier was not British.
Oh, you're talking about? Oh, I know what you're talking about. The younger one that comes later.
Yeah. No, I mean in the animated series, he doesn't have a British accent.
Oh, yes. You're right. Yeah. Yeah, and I actually just watched an interview with the showrunners the other day, and they were talking about how I guess, oh man, I can't remember. Is it Bob Harris, who was the editor at the time? He basically said that like when he heard him, and then when he heard Wolverine, the actor who plays Wolverine, he was like, "That's the voice I've been hearing all these years that I've been reading the X-Men comics." It just matched for him. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Very nice.
No, I was gonna say we were talking about Wolverine getting messed up by Magneto. Magneto messes with Wolverine a lot in this movie. I mean, once he finds out he's got the metal in his skeleton, you got that scene where he's in the train. He tears open the train, and Wolverine thinks he's looking for him, and he's like, "My dear boy, what makes you think I'm looking for you?" And it's like he realizes it's Rogue that he's after. And that's when he, suspends Wolverine, and I think he starts bending his claws. It's just like, really, really just mean stuff. I mean, Magneto does a lot of like really cool, like subtle things with his powers. Like he doesn't, I mean, later obviously he does more grander stuff with them. But there was so many little things that he would do. Like, do you remember when it's him versus the police, and he has the guns all suspended? And he shoots at one of the police officers, but he doesn't, let the bullet penetrate his head, but it's just there spinning.
Yes.
And the dude is having an anxiety attack.
Yes.
I always remember that scene.
But it's so cool that this movie just really kind of rejuvenated the comic book superhero genre in the movies, and it just gave you hope for what was to come next, and it even gave you hope for better DC stuff.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I know there's a lot of people who don't like these movies, and obviously you can pick apart all the differences between the movies and the comics, and a lot of it just gets worse as the movies progress. But it's kind of one of those, you kind of had to be here first for it to be successful with these kind of decisions being made. So that way, later on, other people could point back and be like, yes, that was successful, but fans complained about this. Now that we know these are successful, can we have a little bit more freedom to match what the fans want?
Yeah.
So I think in that respect, regardless of this movie's problems, I think it's still an important movie for comic book movie history.
What was one of your biggest fails in the movie? Be it a character or something that happened.
I
Because
would
I'll tell
say,
you what mine is, but I want to see what yours is.
because I just recently rewatched it, so I know one of the main things was I didn't really like that it didn't seem like Sabretooth and Wolverine knew each other, because that was a big thing in their history, is that even though that both their heads were messed with by the Weapon X program,
Yeah.
they still knew each other, and they obviously had that animosity. I guess if I had to nitpick, that would probably be one of the main things. Because everybody else,
Yeah.
I can't think. Why? What's yours?
My main thing was that Rogue didn't fly.
Oh, well, she hadn't taken Miss Marvel's powers yet. That's the history of that. You know that?
No, I didn't know that actually.
Yeah, the same Miss Marvel that ends up being Captain Marvel in the 80s when Rogue fought her or something. She completely took her powers, not just like for a limited time. It was pretty permanent. Like, I think it left her completely, and I could be wrong. There could be people already commenting that I'm wrong, but I know that for sure she took Ms. Marvel's powers, because they actually touch on that in the X-Men animated series. You see Miss Marvel.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's in one of the later seasons, but like you go into Rogue's mind, and she's being tormented by Miss Marvel. Because she absorbed part of her essence too. But that was the only reason Rogue could fly by the time we got to what I would consider the 91 X-Men, that's the one that the animated series is based on. But I'll tell you what, with the current setup, with there being a Captain Marvel and the X-Men coming, it would be interesting to see if they do that story, because it would give Captain Marvel an interesting story to follow if she lost her powers because of Rogue, so
that would be cool.
But again, we'll just have to wait and see. I will say there's one scene even back then. It's in the trailer. It's the money shot for the trailer. Do you remember the scene where Sabretooth and Wolverine are fighting on top of the Statue of Liberty, and Sabretooth throws Wolverine, and you have this camera shot that you follow, and Wolverine extends his claws, catches one of the piers or of the crown of the statue.
Yeah.
The camera spins around, and then Wolverine comes back and then lands and then pops his claws. And I mean, it's the money shot for the trailer.
Yeah.
But the CGI even back then, just looks so bad.
Yeah. But totally not possible. That's not, you can't do that.
Not how physics works.
No, not at all.
You want to argue physics in a world where people have blades in their hands?
Wait, he doesn't have that power, though.
Mutants can control the weather. Oh, I always thought that was funny how Stan Lee always talked about how Storm bothered him so much because of everything else. It just bothered him that why would a mutant control the weather, he said. But yeah, after that, of course, at the end when they capture Magneto and, him and Professor X are playing chess in the prison, it's just a nice little bookend to the whole thing. And, it just sets up the future. And, unfortunately, I wish there was more of a consistency to those movies. Maybe if it would have had their own Kevin Feige, like the Marvel Universe has, somebody that could have kept it all more consistent, because you have some gems along the way, you have some half gems along the way, and then you have some total stinkers along the way. So, but again,
well, I think they kind of tried to do that when they were like redoing things with everything.
Oh, you mean when they went to X-Men? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was the funny thing about that one. I think
they're being a little more keeping everything a little more consistent in there. So this new whatever it is, this new flow that we're going through is probably going to be way more consistent than the original X-Men, I feel.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. With Marvel running it, it's going to be more consistent. My only concern is I don't know what iteration of the X-Men they're going to use. It feels like the one that most people know is the 91 team because of the animated series. But of course, the X-Men have been through some drastic changes over the years. So Marvel, I'm sure that's part of Marvel's what they're working on behind the scenes is like, which iteration of the X-Men do we show, or do we do a combination, or there's just so many teams over the years because I mean they've been around for like 40 plus years at this point.
Yeah. Wow.
So we'll just have to wait and see. Yeah. But regardless, I mean, even if they decide to go some off the wall way, I mean, I'm sure it'll still be good. And if not, we always have X-Men the animated series. So
yeah, watch it.
But yeah, so just wanted to kind of do this retro review for you guys. If you've never seen it, I'd be curious to hear what you thought, especially if you're younger and you're seeing this for the first time. If you have Disney Plus, go watch this first one, and then comment below what you thought. I mean, for those of us who grew up and it was all there was at the time, and of course we've seen the better movies since. We know that there's better things, but I think as far as like history, this was a good point in history, and I think it helped get us to where we are today. So definitely. Anything else you want to tack on before we go?
No, I think we're good. I think we covered a lot. I think we covered it all.
Well, if you guys have not checked out Vince and his wife Colleen, they run Geek Out SA. They have a live show every Friday at 7 Central Time. So their link will be in the description below. You guys are like at over 1,500 subscribers now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's awesome. So congratulations, guys. That's awesome. We're almost at 300, so we're getting there.
You're getting there.
It
takes time.
Yeah. That's what everybody keeps reminding me. But it's cool. We've gotten some new people, and I've actually hooked up with some other comic book people too, so they'll probably appreciate this particular episode. So anyway, thanks again, guys, and we will see y'all next time.
See you later.